everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a really fascinating theme, crossing borders. We're going to explore the incredible ways that meaning, language, and honestly, even human identity itself can completely transform the second they cross national and cultural boundaries. But to kick things off, you might be wondering, what on earth do a classic Belgian comic book and a notorious Canadian bank robber have in common? Well, the answer lies in the messy, complicated art of adaptation. Both of these offer some brilliant real-world examples of what gets lost, what gets gained, and what gets completely reimagined when stories cross borders.
So, here's our quick roadmap for today. First, translating culture and identity. Second, swearing in Tintin. Third, idioms lost in translation. Fourth, the flying bandit. And finally, adapting crime to film.
All right, part 1, translating culture and identity, and how meaning shifts.
Okay, let's dive into this. There's this really fascinating recent academic paper in the International Journal of Social Science and Education Research Studies. The researchers, Queen Nathania Cristanthi Hiliat and Jumanto, did this deep dive contrastive analysis. Basically, they looked at the comic Tintin in the Land of Black Gold and tracked exactly how English words were translated into Indonesian. They really wanted to see how cultural meaning morphs when you're dealing with, well, a highly sensitive and tricky part of language.
Which brings us to part 2, swearing in Tintin, breaking down curses. Because, as the researchers point out, swearing is a deeply, deeply cultural thing.
Translating taboo language, especially from a character like Captain Haddock, who is literally famous for his creative, bursting insults, is a massive linguistic challenge. Now, what's really interesting about this exact breakdown is that the researchers combed through the comic and isolated 34 specific swear words. We're talking 21 abusive, 12 expletives, and just 1 humorous. But here's the crazy part. Out of those 34 instances, they found only 3 similarities and a staggering 31 differences between the English swear words and their Indonesian equivalents.
So let's look at why that happens in Section 3, idioms lost in translation, and what happens when literal meaning fails. The core problem here is that English curses rely incredibly heavily on cultural metaphors, right? But the Indonesian translations were largely non-idiomatic. Take the English exclamation, crumbs. The translator actually turned this into the Indonesian word astaga, which conveys a general sense of being startled. Because think about it, if a learner tried to translate crumbs literally, they'd get rama rati, which literally just means breadcrumbs. Imagine a character in a comic shouting breadcrumbs when they're surprised. The emotion is completely gone. Or take the word beast. That translates directly to binatang. But in English, calling someone a beast carries this heavy metaphorical weight of them being a formidable or unruly person, whereas binatang literally just points to an actual animal. Let's look at another pair. Great snakes is such a classic Tintin exclamation. But translated literally into Indonesian, it would be ular besar, which just means a literal giant reptile. So instead, the translator again leaned on astaga, meaning the cultural flavor of that quirky English idiom is just totally wiped out and replaced with a generic expression of surprise. And then you have this bizarre English insult, self-silly, which gets translated to sinting, roughly meaning crazy. So the big takeaway here is that translators often have to sacrifice all that colorful, idiomatic flavor of the source language just to make sure the basic emotional meaning actually lands in the target language.
So we've seen how incredibly complex it is when words cross borders. But what happens when people cross them? It's time to pivot from academic linguistics to a wild, real-life, true crime story that Hollywood just couldn't resist.
Section 4, The Flying Bandit, a True Crime Crossing.
Let's see how this builds, because the case of Gilbert Galvin Jr. is wild. He was a charming American criminal whose whole identity transformed the very moment he crossed the border. Check this out. Hour 1, he escapes a Michigan prison. Day 1, he crosses over into Canada. By week 1, he completely ditches his old identity to become Robert Whiteman. Now, to fund this brand new life, he realizes he needs cash, so by month 1, he's robbing banks. Posing as a security analyst, he starts flying around the country, literally hitting multiple cities in a single day. He gets dubbed the Flying Bandit and goes on to hold the record for the most consecutive robberies in Canadian history. Just like a translated word taking on a new meaning in a new country, Galvin constructed an entirely new, highly successful persona simply by crossing a border.
And finally, Section 5, adapting crime to film, Hollywood's hustle.
21. That is the shockingly short number of days it took to film this story. Director Alan Ungar adapted this crazy true crime saga into the 2022 hit film Bandit, starring Josh Duhamel and Mel Gibson.
But because of the COVID-19 pandemic, production actually had to relocate from Canada down to Georgia, which is kind of ironic, right? Crossing the border right back to where Galvin started his criminal journey. But this relocation drastically slashed their shooting schedule from an already incredibly tight 32 days down to a mere 21.
And this brilliantly illustrates the pace they had to keep: 200. In those 21 days, the team actually managed to shoot a staggering 200 scenes. Translating real events to the screen under those kinds of strict time constraints required absolute, pinpoint precision from every single person on set. 95. Despite having less than a month, the crew utilized 95 different sets and locations to properly capture the cross-country spree of the Flying Bandit. It was this monumental task of logistical adaptation, literally faking locations all across Canada while they were actually shooting down in Georgia.
And the behind-the-scenes chaos wasn't just logistical, it was intensely physical. The script was based on Robert Knuckles' true crime book, and to hit their deadlines, the director actually had to run 3 camera units simultaneously. But here's the craziest anecdote. Actor Nestor Carbonell tore his Achilles tendon while filming a chase scene known as the Big Vancouver. Doctors advised him to get immediate surgery, but he flat out refused to quit. He finished principal photography wearing a walking boot, which required these super rapid script rewrites just to accommodate the injury. Talk about absolute dedication to translation, right? And it paid off, because the film ended up being a massive global streaming success.
So what does this all mean? Whether we're looking at the meticulous, frustrating process of translating the colorful idioms of a Belgian comic book into Indonesian, or adapting the wild, border-crossing life of a Canadian bank robber into a slick Hollywood blockbuster under insane pressure, what gets lost or gained in translation? Meaning is just never static. It shifts, it adapts to survive, and sometimes, like the Flying Bandit, it takes on an entirely new life of its own. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I hope you keep questioning how the stories you love are shaped by the borders they cross. See you next time.